All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, ReOpen Ohio, Financial Considerations and Tax Implications, brought to you by the President's Council. My name is Erica Pennick, and I am the Executive Director of the President's Council. Today's webinar is designed for direct question and answer and to create an environment that is truly interactive. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the President's Council website. We also encourage and welcome the opportunity to connect via phone, email, and web chat. Before we get started, please note your video should be automatically turned off and devices muted. If not, please do so at this time. As you have questions or comments, please insert it in the Q&A thread, and we will pause frequently to respond. If you have a question or comment for the presenter, please click the raise your hand button and we will pause to recognize you, at which time we ask that your device be unmuted and your video turned on. Today's expert presenter is Robbie Terry Washington, CPA and MBA. Robbie is founder and president of RTW Exact. With over 25 years of exceptional fiscal and financial management reporting, including over 2 years of public accounting, Robbie's firm focuses on accounting, tax planning, and financial management services to clients in major industries, including financial services and banking, manufacturing, telecommunications, private equity, and construction. Headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, and Cleveland, Ohio, RTW helps clients organize and utilize their financial data to make better financial decisions and mitigate risks. Robbie, thank you so much for joining us this morning. As we reach to a new normal of doing business, we recognize and take it for granted how important taxes are. While we are fully grateful for the resources available to us as we help to sustain to this point, including the P3, the EIDL loan, the Cuyahoga County Stabilization Fund, the boost funding, stimulus checks, and other cash infusions, please walk us through what we need to know and, most importantly, what we need to do to maintain sustainability during this time of reopening.
Okay. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Shana and the President's Council for presenting this webinar. Right now, everybody knows the state of our economy, and people are searching for answers, trying to find out what type of funding should they apply for. And what I've been doing, and I've been trying to blog, and I'm saying apply for everything and see what sticks. But specifically today, our focus is on the CARES Act, which was put into legislation on March 27th to address the COVID-19 pandemic and the negative impact that it has had on our economy, and specifically our small businesses. Because our large businesses, they have reserves. They can make it through this time, but our small businesses cannot. And that's the reason why they have the set-asides to help the small businesses with funding, just to continue to try and make it until we get through this pandemic. So the first thing that I want to talk about and highlight are what types of funding is available. And if we go to the next slide, the COVID-19 funding and CARES Act slide, you'll see the first loan that was presented by our government and the SBA is what's called the SBI EIDL loan. Now, this is nothing new. This economic injury disaster loan has been around for years. But what our government did is they expanded the criteria for people to be eligible for this type of loan to address the issues. So what I'm telling people is apply for the loan, and even if you are rejected and you are denied the loan, there was a grant piece to that loan that you were eligible for. So one of the questions that I'll ask the audience, and you don't have to answer now, have you applied for the SBA loan? did you get in queue? Unfortunately, now they've closed the window of opportunity for applications. So if you have not yet applied for the SBA loan, there may not be any opportunity now. They're just processing the loans that were completed, I believe, through the end of April. And I think some people were able to get in the first part of May. What does CARES Act, what does that stand for? Corona's Aid, Relief, Economic Security. That's basically what it stands for. And our governments are good at acronyms. And what should we know about it? And what type of relief and eligibility requirements are available to our small businesses? The U.S. government, as you all know and been reading and listening to the news, they set aside $2 trillion. Now that $2 trillion is not specifically set aside for small businesses, but a big portion of that was set aside for the funding for the SBA, in addition, the PPP loan, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. The SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the round one funding, which we know is closed now. Just to give you a little bit of stats on the average loan size was $206,000 that went out to various businesses. There was a $2 million cap, meaning you're only eligible for up to $2 million in funding. And the average loan size was $206,000. As of, I believe, the end of April, the SBA had approved 1.2 million in loans, and the average size of those loans was 150,000. Now, with that, in that first rounding, if you had applied prior to March 29th, you were eligible for a 10K grant. One of the other questions, if the audience can tell me, were you a recipient of any of the grant funding? I'd like to know who actually received a piece of the grant funding. You were eligible for this advance, even if you were denied the loan. So some of the blogging that I was sending out is telling people, go ahead and apply for the loan, even if you're denied, because you can get the grant portion of it, which does not have to be repaid. We will talk about the taxability of that grant later, because they have not decided whether they're going to tax that. I'm telling people, just stay tuned. The interest rates are very, very low for this type of loan. A regular for-profit company, the interest rate is 3.75%. If you're a nonprofit, 2.75%. And you don't have to start repaying the loan for 1 year. There's a 12-month deferment. And you have up to 30 years to pay it off. Now, you can pay it off sooner. There's no prepayment, but they are allowing 30 years to prepay this loan, to pay the loan off. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next, can we go to the round two funding slide, please? Okay, round two funding, it was only opened up to businesses for a limited period. And some people missed out on that window of opportunity. Because currently now, the only businesses that can apply for the SBA loan are agricultural businesses, basically the farming industry. In addition, in the second round of funding, that 10,000 grant that was, anyone was eligible for that, they changed the requirements for that. In the second round of funding, and I think this is most people receive the grants from the second round of funding. If you didn't have any employees and you applied for the SBA, you would receive $1,000. 2 to 10 employees or up to 5 was 5,000 plus. 10 or more employees, you were eligible for the 10,000 grant. So the caveat to this, though, you need to check your bank account if you applied for the loan, because there's no notification. You'll just see the monies hit your bank account based on the information that you provided in the loan application. And you'll see either 1,000, a denomination from 1,000 up to 10,000 based on your business and how many employees you have. Any questions now on the SBA loans? We're taking questions now. I think that there are 3 questions. There's some chats going on. Karen Ross, she says, Cleveland Cold Brew Coffee was given 2,000. Congratulations. Want to know the requirements to have your loan forgiven. And Erica has provided a link. If you look at the chats, if everyone pick up the chats, there is a form for the forgiveness part. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the PPP funding. One of the things that I want each person on this webinar to understand, there is the SBA grant advance portion is forgiven, and that's up to 10,000. However, if you apply for the PPP loan, the up to 8 weeks of your payroll is also forgiven. But what many people don't know is if you receive $10,000 advance from the SBA, and then you are also eligible for the PPP funding, you have to let the PPP funder know that you received that grant. And for example, if the PPP funding authorizes you a loan of $50,000 and you receive $10,000 from the SBA grant, you have to inform them so that they will only give you $40,000 because they will not allow you to double dip. Now, any amount above the grant that you receive from the SBA is also forgiven. You just cannot double dip. So you have to take the both together, and that's the amount that's forgiven. Now, has our government, have they figured out how all of this is going to work, how they are going to administer this? No, there are a lot of unanswered questions. Nancy Pelosi, who I'm assuming everybody knows, our House Speaker, she is trying to figure out a way to make it, because right now they're saying that the grants that you receive, although you don't have to pay those back, you have to pay taxes on them. But they're arguing to try to eliminate even paying taxes on the amounts that's forgiven. Another part of our administration, the funding or the forgiveness part of the PPP loan that you receive, that you don't have to pay back, the government has said that part of your payroll you cannot deduct on your financials. We're also arguing to try to and at least have that deductible as well as being forgiven. Because what will happen is the PPP loan, unlike the SBA loan, has to be paid back in 2 years. So what's going to happen in 2 years if the loan is not forgiven and people can't pay it back? So one of the things that they did on May 13th is they decided that any small business who received the PPP loan less than $2 million does not have to certify, does not have to prove anything. Those amounts will automatically be forgiven. It's called a safe harbor, basically saying we will assume that you did everything that you were supposed to do and you met all the requirements for your loan to be forgiven. So that's good news. So you don't have to worry about certifying. And actually, if you received a loan under $2 million, that form, that is not even required. It's only if you received funding over $2 million. So that's the good news that we received last week. Any questions? Let's see, I see the chats, but I don't see any questions. Carl Singleton says, if we receive the EIDL loan, is some of that forgiven? With the EIDL loan, the only portion that is forgiven is that advance, which is the grant portion. That's the only portion of the EIDL loan that is forgiven at this point. Changes may come down the line. They may say some of it is forgiven, but right now, what we know now is the only portion that's forgiven is the grant portion. And Carl says, we didn't get in advance. We got it all at once. What I would say to you, Mr. Singleton, is call your rep to find out if a portion of the proceeds that you received were a part of the advance. Because if you received it all in one lump sum, I don't know if a part of that was the grant. You'll have to call and find out. Any other questions from our participants? Okay. All right, so let's move on now to PPP. Or before we move on to PPP, let's talk about what the funding uses are, what they're telling you you have to use it for. The main things are payroll and contractor payments. So if you have employees where you actually take out taxes, it needs to be used for your payroll. If you have independent contractors where you issue them a 1099, your vendor payments, like your rent, your utility, your supplies, insurance, those types of things. Those are what the funds should be used for. And the other caveat for your rent and mortgage, you would have had to have some type of rent or lease agreement in place on February 15th of 2020 for those payments to be eligible for the funding. Okay, we have, thanks. Is this EIDL advance as well? I think, hopefully, did I answer that for you, Janita? Janita asks, is this for EIDL advance as well? Hopefully I've answered that question. Okay. I don't see the slides up. Can you guys see the slides? Can you apply?
Do you see Deontay's question? She has the question in the chat as well.
Yeah, that's he. Deontay is a he. Can you apply for the PPP? Let's see, it went away. What happened to his question? Can we put his question? Okay.
Deontay says, I called SBA because I did not receive any funds or grants. Since my application was submitted on March 29th, I was instructed to resubmit under the new standard, and I received an email saying I was denied. What should I do? Can I apply for the P3 if I had 1099 workers?
Yes. In the first round of funding, the PPP loan, unlike the SBA funded the SBA EIDL loans. The PPP loans are not funded by the SBA. You have to go to a bank that you have a relationship with to get the PPP funding. Now, in the second round of funding, they've expanded that. You still have to go to a bank that you have a relationship with, but some financial institutions like American Express and some of the other creditors now, if you have credit cards, business credit cards with those, are also have the PPP loans available. So you can apply with your bank, and if you have a relationship with any of your credit card companies, they are also, you're able to apply for the loans with them. So if you were denied the SBA EIDL loan, you most definitely can apply for the PPP. However, you can apply for both if you're eligible. You just have to meet the requirements. So the biggest question is, do I have to apply for one in order to apply for the other? No, they're two separate loans. You can apply for one or the other or both. And I'm telling folks to apply for both, but right now the SBA, we're closed out. We don't know if there's going to be a third round. I know Nancy Pelosi is trying to work on the third round, but those funds will be limited in this third round. The third round is really to help the state and local governments recover, because they're struggling as well. Everybody is struggling right now. So this third round is specifically going to be for your local and state governments. However, please apply for the PPP, even if you're unsure that you are eligible. The banker or the representative will walk you through, but I say go ahead and apply, because they've extended the eligibility. So for example, you can use your 1099 contractor costs now. all you have to present is a profit and loss statement, or if you've already filed your 2019 taxes and you have a Schedule C, you can present that. If you have a corporation, you can submit either your taxes or your profit and loss for your business. So if you look at the loan details for the PPP program, you would take 12 months of your salary, of your payroll, divide that by 12, and then multiply that by 2.5. That is the amount that you're eligible to apply for. So when you're sending in your documents for the PPP, you want to send that in. So let's just say you don't have any payroll. So you don't have a 941. You don't have state unemployment or federal unemployment because you don't have payroll. All you have are 1099 contractors. What you're going to send in is your profit and loss statement. You're going to send in the 1099s that you paid your support folks, and they will use that to determine the amount of funding that you are eligible for. The PPP loan is for 2 years. You get a 6-month deferment to pay it back, and it's at 1%. Apply, people. You will never find a loan at 1%. And even if you, I'm sorry.
Question. So I hear you saying that those with contracted employees are now eligible to apply for P3, which was not the case originally. Can you provide us with a link that gives those instructions? Because there were a number of businesses that applied under the first round, which were denied because of that eligibility criteria.
Okay, we can provide that information with the link to the YouTube. I'll make sure that the President Council get the links to all of the new applications and the new requirements so that if you have not applied, you can go ahead and apply. The calculation again is the average 12 month times 2.5, and it's capped at $100,000 per employee. Most of my clients don't have that problem because they're not paying their employees more than $100,000. So most people should be eligible. And as you can see, the $100,000 cap per employee, this includes independent contractors and sole proprietors. So what that means is I don't have payroll, but I have independent contractors that I pay, or I'm an independent contractor. So let's look at it from the flip side. I do work for the President's Council, and I receive a 1099 from the President's Council, and that's really the only work I do. Am I eligible now for the PPP since I'm just an independent contractor who receives a 1099 and I file a Schedule C? The answer is in round 2, yes, you are. In round 1, you were not. So they've expanded who's eligible because what they found out is so many people were left out because they were so small that they didn't have payroll, and maybe they were a gig worker, like an Uber a person or a Lyft person. And so those people were kind of left out of the equation. So in the second round, they wanted to address that population of people or that demographic of businesses and people to be able to get some type of relief. So if you just get it to 99 and you do work and you file your Schedule C, you are now eligible to apply for PPP funding. Okay, any other questions? We talked about what's included. If you look at the slides, I don't want to go through and read the slides because you guys can read, but it tells you what's considered payroll cost. Basically everything: salaries, wages, commissions, tips. If you have employee benefits and you pay medical on behalf, if you provide vacation and sick time, all of that is considered. In the first round of funding, they didn't consider vacation. They didn't consider sick leave. In addition to that, there are many businesses that their businesses didn't have any activity when the pandemic occurred. So what happened is they put out many of their employees, they furloughed them because they didn't have the wherewithal to pay them. So in the second round of funding, let's just say I have a business, I had 10 employees, okay? I furloughed those employees. I'm not paying them their wages, but I'm continuing to pay their medical costs so that they can go to the hospital, etc. If you have any furloughed employees and you're still paying any type of benefits on behalf of those employees, you are eligible for PPP funding, even if you're not paying the wages to those employees, but you have maintained the benefits on behalf of those furloughed employees.
Hey, Robbie, I have another question.
Yes.
So one of our participants owns a transportation company, and they're asking if each of their chauffeurs, who would be 1099 employees, would be eligible to apply for assistance. And so my follow-up and clarification for that question is, what's the distinction between his employees applying for unemployment or PUA versus he as the employer applying for P3 on the company's behalf in their support?
We have to look at it separately. So I am the employer and I have 4 1099 individuals that I pay. They're independent contractors and I pay them, okay? We have to look at it separately. So when I apply, I am going to include the cost that I pay my independent contractors, as well as if I have any payroll costs, okay? In addition to that, that independent contractor, now here's where it gets sticky. And this is where, when our governments, they come out with these laws, they haven't mapped and figured everything out. That's why we have to just continue to talk to our congressmen, our legislators, to say, hey, we haven't addressed these issues. And then they'll come back and say, hey, we understand that we have an issue here. So here's something that they really haven't addressed. So I have 4 independent contractors. I've included those payments that I make to them to obtain funding from PPP. In addition, so right now, what I would say for those type of examples, if I have 4 contractors and I'm continuing to pay those contractors are not eligible. They're only eligible if I've ceased making payments to them. So if I had contractors that I was paying and I can't pay them now, I don't have the wherewithal to pay them. Now they are eligible now to apply for PPP because their funding has ceased. So you have to say, am I still receiving funding? Am I still being paid? If you're not being paid, apply. If you're continuing to be paid, then no, you can't apply because you haven't lost anything. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the other thing I want you to know, let's just say I'm the employer. I had those 4 independent contractors. So as of, let's say, March 15th, I was unable to continue to pay them. So I apply for the funding, and then I get the funding on May 15th. From March 15th until May 15th, that independent contractor can apply for funding for those 2 months that they were not paid. Does that make sense? So even if your employer starts to repay you, you can still get or apply for funding for the months or the time that you were not compensated, because they understand that there's a waiting period now, that where if you apply for funding, you still don't have the funding, so you can't pay people. So to fill in that gap, the independent contractor can apply for funding for the time period that they missed pay, if that makes sense. That's how they're trying to fill in that gap.
I have 2 additional questions. One is from Sheena Johnson. She asks, can you apply for more than one business?
Yes. Now, the difficulty in that is what they're looking at is common ownership. So when you apply, so let's say you have 3 different businesses. Part of the questions when you apply for funding, they're going to ask you, do you have any other affiliate businesses where you are the owner. And the reason why they ask that question is because they don't want you to get 3 different fundings. They don't want you eligible for 3 different businesses. Now, what happens is you're eligible for increased funding to cover your other businesses, but you won't get 3 different loans for the 3 different businesses. You'll get 1 loan for all 3 businesses. And that's the information when you're applying that you have to basically complete and provide that information in the application to let them know that you do have other businesses, other affiliate businesses where you are the owner, whether 100% or 50%. And those are the questions that they ask. But you know, you're not eligible. If you have 5 different businesses, you can't get 5 different PPP loans. You get 1 loan. Sheena Johnson, I have 2 daycare businesses. One is a center with 7 employees, and I didn't finish, and one is a home with other. Hopefully I answered that question for you. You would provide the information for all of your businesses when you apply for the loans. Okay, what do you need for payroll costs? You need 941s. You need your quarterly 941s, and depending on when you started payroll, so let's say you've been in business for a long time, they are going to request a year's worth of 941s, and they're going back to the 2nd quarter of April 2019. So they want the 2nd, 3rd, 4th quarter of 2019 and the 1st quarter of 2020. So those are the 941s that you need to gather if you have payroll to be able to provide. You also need to provide your state unemployment. So people are asking, why do they want the state unemployment? One, they want to make sure that you've paid your state unemployment. Why do they want to make sure that you've paid your state unemployment? Because when your employees who you've laid off apply for unemployment, they want to make sure that you've paid in your unemployment. So that's why they're in part of the process. Let's just say you have payroll. You haven't submitted any of your tax deposits to the federal government. You haven't paid any of your unemployment. More than likely, you will be denied. They want evidence that you have filed and paid your payroll tax deposits and unemployment insurance before they will disperse any funds to you. So if you are not, unfortunately, if you are not caught up on your filings in your payroll, your filings for your federal and your state and your local, more than likely you will be denied a loan. Why would they deny you a loan? You haven't even paid your prior taxes. So that's why it's important to stay current and file and pay your taxes, because a lot of people were denied because they either didn't file their payroll taxes and they haven't paid. So people that have stayed current, most of those people were eligible and did receive some type of funding. Okay, I'm gonna take a look at the chats because there's about 11 chats in here, and I want to make sure that I've addressed every each person's questions. Okay.
There's one in here from Dorsey.
Okay.
Dorsey asks if they applied for P3 based on the 2019 payouts to their 1099 contractors, does that make the contractors ineligible for applying for P3 on their own?
It only makes them ineligible if they are continued to be paid. So if you've continued to pay your 1099 workers, they are not eligible to apply. But if you don't have the wherewithal to pay them, yes, they can apply, because they can say, hey, RTW was paying me up until the end of March. I have received no further payments from her. You are now eligible to apply. But if you are still receiving funds, if you're still receiving your pay, no, you're not eligible. Any other questions? The most important thing that I want people in the audience to understand is the biggest question that I've been seeing from people is on that loan forgiveness, okay? if you are eligible for both the advance on the SBA loan and you are eligible for the PPP funding, that 8-week period that is forgiven, again, if that 8-week period equated to $50,000, but you already received $10,000 from the SBA, you have to let your PPP funder know, hey, wait a minute, before you disperse me $50,000, I need to let you know I received $10,000 from the SBA advance. Then you will now receive $40,000. And that's the most important thing that you don't want. And then let's just say you don't do it. Okay, what's going to happen now? That $10,000, if you receive the 10 and you receive the 50, you're going to have to pay taxes on that $10,000. So it's not too late if you received both. It's just that at the end of the year, instead of $50,000 being forgiven, only $40,000 is going to be forgiven, and that $10,000 you're going to pay taxes on, and you have to include that in your income. Because you understand what I'm saying? If you have any questions during that time, just give me a call, because I know it is confusing, and they keep coming back and changing things, and that's why what I've been doing is every time they change something, I've been blogging to try to explain what that change means to each person. Are there any more questions, Erica, on your end? If not, let's move on to the unemployment. So we'll have some time at the end for a question and answer. Okay. Now, what is the PUA? If we could go to the PUA. The PUA is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. Now, what does this mean? Okay, what this means is, generally, under normal circumstances, only employees, and employees are individuals who receive a check where taxes have been withheld, and they get a W-2 at the end of the year. Only those types of individuals were eligible for unemployment with their state. So if you were furloughed or laid off or terminated, you would go to your state, your county, and you would apply for unemployment assistance. Well, what happened again? What happened to all of those 1099 folks that were not receiving any payment? Generally, they're not eligible for unemployment as a 1099 person. Why? Why would a 1099 person not be eligible for unemployment? I'm going to tell you why. If you have payroll, part of your expense as an employer is state unemployment and federal unemployment. So you're paying into that fund so that when one of your employees is terminated for whatever reason and they're eligible to collect unemployment, you've paid into that fund. So when your employee goes and applies for unemployment, there's funding in there to be able to pay those employees. Well, as a 1099 person, you're not paying any payroll taxes. You're not paying into any type of unemployment. That's why under general, normal circumstances, you're not eligible for unemployment. Okay? So you had better have a reserve or save some money or do something. But of course, our governments, we understand that you don't have anywhere to go now. Those 1099s, they don't have anywhere to go. There's no jobs. You know, businesses are shut down. So they created this PUA to address unemployment for those 1099 workers, those gig workers, the Uber, the Lyft. I'm a 1099 worker. Let's just say, oh, my funding got cut off. I can now apply for the PUA. The maximum amount is $600, and this is totally funded by the federal government. So the federal government will allocate to each state a portion to pay out this PUA assistance. And this PUA assistance is specifically for 1099 workers. Now, here's the caveat for this PUA funding. What has happened, and because our governments, they don't think about everything. If you are an employee and you apply for unemployment benefits, guess what? You're also going to be eligible for this PUA. But the PUA wasn't originally set up for regular employees. It was set up for 1099 workers. But to incentivize employees, they also made this eligible for regular employees. So now a regular employee who got laid off gets their regular unemployment, and they also are eligible for up to $600 a week for the pandemic. If you are a 1099 person or an employee, you have to go through your state to apply for the benefits. When you go to your state and apply for the benefits, at that time, they will let you know what you're eligible for. Some states are allowing the 1099 folks to also be eligible for regular unemployment. So if you're a 1099 person, depending on the state, you may be eligible for the $600 PUA and the state-run unemployment. Now, that's not true for every state. You have to find out from your state what you're eligible for. I know in Ohio, if you are a 1099 worker, you're only eligible for that $600, and it's up to $600. They will ask for your 1099s. They will ask for a profit and loss statement for those 1099 folks. And then they will calculate, based on your adjusted gross income from your 2019 tax return, what you're eligible for. I've been helping a lot of 1099 contractors in Ohio apply. So that's why I know you're only eligible for up to $600. Now, the regular unemployment, they've extended the benefits to January 31st of 2021. That only means if you've applied, you can't get work, you are eligible for your regular unemployment through January 31st of 2021. However, the PUA ends in some states on July 15th and other states on July 31st. Now, is that firm? Might not be. In another month, our administration may come back, and this is why it's important. If we send out any information for you to contact your congressman, your House of Representatives, it's important for you as business owners to get engaged in that process. Because one of the things that we were doing on the webinar with Nancy Pelosi is we're trying to extend this PUA, because guess what? By July, do you think our economy is going to be recovered? So what's going to happen to those 1099 folks who are relying on the $600 per week on July 31st? So hopefully, stay tuned. We'll keep everyone apprised if they extend the benefits for the PUA. So what's eligible? Each state determines eligibility requirement, the criteria. Each state requires that you provide, it's basically you have to abide by the state has to sign an agreement with the federal government. I don't know right now any state that has not signed the agreement, so I think all states are on board. Regular unemployment is due to expire January 31st. They extended it from 26 weeks to 39 weeks. The federal portion is maxed out at $600, again, which is due to expire July 15th or July 31st, depending on your state. Find out from your state when that expires. Okay, and then all other amounts, you may be eligible, but that amount is going to be funded by your states. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Or if there's any questions.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. We have a question from Deontay. I had an employee who was denied unemployment because she did not meet the 20-week standard. Was that correct?
It's based on the state. If the state says that there's a requirement to meet that, she can appeal it. She can go back and appeal it, because what I would ask and what I would challenge with the state is, was she working prior to working for your company? Did she have another job? So what you need to do is, if you worked for more than one employer during the year, you need to tell the state, hey, this was my last job, but during 2019, I worked for this company or that company, or I was a 1099 for other companies, you need to provide all the information so that you are eligible. So sometimes people just go in and provide information on their most recent employer, but any company or person that you worked for during 2019, please provide that information to your state, because they're going to take from each employer that you work for, they're going to determine from all of them what you are eligible for. So make sure you give them all of that information.
We have two more questions from Dorsey. The first is, what is the interest rate on the portion of the EIDL loan that must be repaid?
That's 3.75% for for-profits. 12-month deferment. No prepayment penalty, 30-year term. If you are a non-for-profit, 2.75%. 12-month deferment, 30-year term, no prepayment penalty. And what I've been advising my clients, because some of my clients have these high interest day, what they call them, day loans, payday loans, it's high interest. Even if you don't need the loan, apply for it and pay off all of that other high interest stuff, because that'll bring you a lot of relief.
The second from Dorsey is approved expenditures and purchases to be in compliance with the SBA EIDL loan. Can you tell us what those are?
Okay, we kind of talked about those, but basically your payroll, your contractor costs, just think about pretty much all of your operational costs, right? You have vendors that you pay. That's considered your utilities, your rent, if you have a mortgage. So just think about all of your operational costs is basically included.
Robbie, this is a very good conversation, and we have a lot of questions. I just wanted to remind everybody we have 10 minutes until the end of the webinar. We have another question from Deontay. Once appealed, and if it wins the appeal, will that employee be eligible for back pay?
Yes. Unemployment, you are always eligible for back pay when it comes to unemployment. So whether it's federally funded or whether it's state funded. So for example, I just assisted a 1099 worker last week apply for the PUA in Ohio, just applied in May, but that person is eligible for back pay from, I think, February 27th, I can't remember the day, but they should receive funding from February through the date that their application is approved. Yes, so you will receive one big check.
Robbie has a tremendous amount of information, and we know that a lot of things are coming forth out of this webinar. And what the President's Council has committed to do is to provide 3 businesses will be selected post-webinar by way of a survey to receive services at the President's cost from Robbie. As you can tell, she has a lot of on-time information, up-to-date information that can help all of our businesses sustain and revitalize from this social and economic pandemic. So we want to make certain that everyone gets their questions answered, but also avails themselves to the services available to them through the President's Council and RTW. Robbie, if you want to continue.
Okay, basically right now, I'll just do a quick summary, because I know this is a lot of information and it is confusing, and our business owners, what I've been trying to do is just send out the information to kind of give you some direction, because people are so confused. Where do I go? What do I do? Here's a good summary. Apply for everything. If you are not sure whether you're eligible, apply anyway. If you have questions, shoot me an email. But what I'm saying to you is apply anyway. And the reason why I'm telling people to apply for everything, because the requirements are constantly changing. So in round 1, so many of us wasn't eligible for many of the benefits that were being presented. In round 2, that changed. Round 3 is going to change. So what I'm saying is get in queue, because everything right now is first come, first serve. So at the beginning of our pandemic, one of the reasons RTW was sending out that information weekly, daily, is because I knew if you don't get in at the beginning, you may get left out. There's still, however, some opportunity, and our, the folks that run our administration, Nancy Pelosi, and those types of people, understand that some people didn't apply because they didn't know that they were eligible. They didn't know where to go. They didn't know where to get the resources. So they are still trying to keep some of the funding still open and available for people. Based on my experience, even though they've closed out the ability to apply for the SBA EIDL loan, based on my experience, I believe that that is going to open back up for a third round. And the reason I believe that is because just talking to my small businesses, reading all of the information every day, there are so many businesses who have yet to receive any funding. Part of that is because during that first round, people received money, businesses received money that had no business receiving it, okay? The second round is taking longer for you to receive your funds because the people that they established a whole watchdog group to make sure that the amounts that were set aside and allocated for small businesses like ours, that those are the groups and businesses that actually receive the funding. So they're doing more vetting this time. So what I would say to you is just please be patient. Check in with your rep, your funding rep, but be patient. They're taking a little more time this time around to make sure. And the other thing that they're doing is if they have businesses that receive money that shouldn't have, they are actually going back and say, send that money back. Some people are automatically sending it back. Like you heard the shake guy, whatever that shake guy, he went ahead and sent it back. So you do have others that don't need the money that are sending it back. But of course, it takes time for the government to get that all together to say, okay, we got this money back. Now we have all of these businesses in queue. How much can we give each business? So I would say just be patient. The second round is taking a little bit longer. The first round, they went too fast, and guess what? A lot of people get money that should not have. They don't want to do that this time. That's why they're taking their time to make sure that the right people get the funding.
Tina Johnson has a question. She asks, is there a due date to have the application submitted to have the P3 forgiven? And can you share a little more information about the President's Council, which I already did?
Yes. You have up until June 30th for PPP. So don't wait till June 30th. When we get off this call, go ahead and apply. It only takes seconds to apply. And I know we're all busy and we don't have time, but I say if you have not applied, when you get off of this webinar, apply. Get your documents in order because you're going to have your documents. Erica, are we sharing these the PowerPoint with the audience?
Yes, we will share all of the PowerPoints and the links and all information.
If you take these links, I put all of the information in there minus the links. Next time I'll know to put the link right in the PowerPoint presentation. But if you go through this PowerPoint presentation, it spells out what forms you need and everything that you need in order to apply for the funding. Make sure you get all of your information together so that when you go to the portal or the link to apply, you can just simply upload the information. So you can use the slides to use as a guide for the information that you need to apply. Any other questions? We've got a couple of minutes left, and I thank everybody for participating. Hopefully this was beneficial to you. Hopefully you learned something. And again, if you haven't applied, go ahead and apply. Now, the other thing that I wanted to also, it wasn't the focus of this webinar, but if you're not eligible for any of the COVID funding, because this is the COVID funding, the SBA does have other types of funding that you can apply for. One of the things that I want any person in the medical field, this is very important. Bill Gates, Microsoft, has tons and tons of grants for people in the medical field. I don't have a lot of information about it, but what I would tell you, Google, Microsoft, grants, funding. There's tons of links depending on what you're doing. If you provide medical equipment, or if you know, whatever you do in the medical field, there's tons of grants that Bill Gates has set aside to provide to businesses who are in the medical industry.
Robbie, thank you so much for all of this information. It has been very, very helpful, as you can tell by the questions and comments from all of our attendees. As we conclude this webinar, I again want to encourage and welcome each of you to contact the President's Council via email, phone, or web, and follow and interact with us on our social media platforms. Please like, follow, share, subscribe, comment, and post your questions. We want to hear from you. We want to know your ideas. And most importantly, we want to engage with you as an engine for Black business growth. As we've mentioned, today's webinar, along with the slide presentations, will be shared with each participant. Additionally, we ask and encourage each of you to complete a brief post-webinar survey. From the survey submissions, 3 businesses will be selected to receive free financial services from Robbie and her team at RTW, compliments of the President's Council Excellence in Entrepreneurship at Your Business program. However, to qualify, you must complete the survey at the end of the webinar. Again, if you have any questions that we were not able to answer today on this webinar, please do contact us directly via our website, thepresidentscouncil.com, or via phone, which is directly to me, Erica, the Executive Director, at 216-905-9729. We will also provide direct contact information to Robbie and her team at RTW. Thank you again, Robbie, and thank you all of our participants for joining us today, and we look forward to connecting and engaging with each of you.
And thank you, Erica. I'd like to say one last thing. I know Janita asked about the President's Council. The President's Council has been around for many years. The President's Council, like any Black, they're the chamber. They're basically the Black chamber in Cleveland, Ohio. They are there to support the community and business growth. So if you're not a member of the President's Council, you are a business. I would suggest and advise, they have different levels of membership, to join the President's Council. I have partnered with the President's Council. They have been a tremendous support to my business, and they have been a tremendous support to all of the surrounding businesses in Cleveland, Ohio. So if you're not a member, I suggest joining whenever you have the wherewithal. There's tons of information. They put on different webinars and seminars throughout the year, just a plethora of information for your business. So I would suggest definitely this is one membership that as a small business would definitely benefit you. And thank you guys for participating.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you for that. We hope to hear from all of you soon, and have a safe and wonderful day. Thank you.